I don't like debating with religious people. Like the ones who come to your door. Have you heard the word about Unitarian Universalism? Well, you never hear that one because most Unitarian Universalists don't like debating about, well, some of them like debating about religion, but not necessarily with religious people. I have some friends who like debating with religious people who come to the door. Like they would invite them in and then, oh really, well tell me what you believe and I'll tell you what I believe. Have any of you ever tried that? A couple of us? Yeah. And so then you know what the problem is. It's not that first conversation, right? The first conversation is like, oh interesting, that's what you believe. Well, our church believes this and here's some pamphlets. It's the next time when they bring the prayer group. Oh, that's what you believe, and we were very concerned about it. And so we brought backup. Logical arguments were so good that now we've got the team to take them all down. So anyway, I'm not a fan of that. Personally, I've never really been a fan of that. And I'll tell you why. It's because we're talking about things that can't be verified. Right? So that part's a little more recent. Personally, I used to love to like kind of philosophy around, like, oh, what about this? What about that? I still like some good science fiction nowadays. But in terms of talking face to face to another human, and in conversations with intent, like we're gonna go somewhere. The spirits are angry. So in conversations that are going somewhere, I personally have all the way. We'll here. I really don't. Okay, it's me, because I just muted it. So I'll just use the hand mic. I'll just use Katie's mic. I use the hand mic, I feel like a diva the whole time. Lady Gaga. You don't want that personality. Maybe you do want that personality. When Shigo Master said this might happen. Yeah. Cool. Hello. Okay, let's try this again.
Much better.
Anyway, conversations about stuff that can't be verified. Really good. Like, was it the spirits that did mess up our microphone equipment? How are you gonna find that out? Right? What was it? My chi? And I mean, maybe somewhere down the years, if we found me a SPECT magnetometer and like had me meditate, we might be able to verify that. But for today, we're not having a conversation that's based on evidence. We're having a conversation that's just based on theory. And who can speak louder about their theory, who's more committed to their theory, who has the best rhetorical fallacies. Because when you don't have evidence to lean on, you end up having to use all sorts of other stuff. I found a great quote about this from Christopher Hitchens, who says, "That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence." So this is kind of where I stand. Anytime somebody wants to come and tell me, "Oh, here's this thing I believe," and it's like, "Well, cool for you." But if we're making assertions without evidence, there's no reason for me to need to debate that. I'm probably not going to convince you, and you're definitely not going to convince me. Good luck. Would you turn this down by like just 1 point? It's a little bit making me nervous. Thank you so much. Okay. See if I can get back in the flow here. So this has been true of all the world's religions to one degree or another. Right? I'm speaking to you not as a non-religious person. I'm speaking to you here as an ordained Buddhist priest. And our religion has it too. Buddhism prides itself on being the most rational of religions. religions, like, oh, we use logic, but they don't tell you it's internally consistent logic. In many of the big monastic institutions, they have these practices of debate where you hone your reason, but you can win the debate if you can find a quote from a scripture that proves your point, right? And it's kind of like the medieval Christian philosophers, you know, their internal logic was great. They were really cool Aristotelian logicians. They knew how to parse it, but it always came down to they were using their logic to prove a point that was already assumed. So I don't like having these debates so much anymore. I'm already an introvert, so if anybody knocks on my door, I make sure they can't see me through the door with windows on the top. I don't recommend these for introverts, because tall people actually will, I think it's very rude. They'll see if you're home. So I go around the corner when I hear a knock. Just because one tall person did that, and that scarred me. But especially if I see the folks out on the rounds with their book, right, then I'm definitely not answering the door. And Mark is not allowed to answer the door. I saw those guys. Did anybody text? Is it a friend? No, nobody texted. We're not answering. So it's been true in all the religions of the planet that I can think of. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about today's socio-political sphere. Because this has always been true. Right? Propaganda has always been a thing, right? Or else the people who are meddling in our elections now wouldn't have gotten in the place where they could do that without a big, cool propaganda machine, right? Always been a thing. But it seems like now it's really a thing. Have you noticed that? And so today we're going to explore a little bit about, like, well, maybe why is that such a thing now? And what in the heck we are to do about this. So this has been called, in case you haven't heard the new hip slang, this has been called the post-truth era. Has anybody heard this terminology, post-truth? All right, let me be the one to introduce you to it. I'll give you one slide ahead. This was Oxford Dictionary's word of the year in 2016, post-truth. Okay? And what a great year for that. So word of the year, isn't it? And just something, I don't want to get too political. I'm not going to stand on one side or the other. I'm just going to give you the facts, which will sound a lot like I'm standing on the liberal side. But to be balanced, like on the various kind of fact-checking websites, like Hillary Clinton, Obama, these guys all also make a number of non-factual statements. But in the recent presidential race, you saw one sort of standard political fare from Hillary Clinton, like factual statement, appeal to emotion with a slightly skewed semi-factual statement. And then you saw this other character making almost no factual statements at all, right? Like when you fact check it, it's like, no. Like 6 out of 7 or something, I forget the exact figure, but some ridiculous, like 90% of the statements explicitly false. Wow. And this is common knowledge that nobody's unaware of this if you have access to the facts, and yet somehow the thing that people who didn't get to vote for Bernie Sanders said was, well, I don't like him, but at least he's a straight shooter. And it's like, wow. And so people have wondered, and again, these are not my political views. This is stuff you could fact check me on, please do so. What are the percentage of factual statements? Did people say he's a straight shooter, even though they knew these? Yeah, and it's a weird paradox. And so this is kind of at the basis of what people call this post-truth era. Because let's read what was this definition from. This is the one from the Oxford Dictionary. Relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief. So facts less influential than appeals to emotion. You guys know this logical or rhetorical fallacy, right? This is where instead of, if I had done this, I wouldn't have said, well, these politicians do this percentage of this, and this one did this percentage. I would say this one's bad, this one's good. We all gotta watch out for So there's scummy people in the world, and then there's okay people in the world. You don't want to be aligned with the wrong one. That might be an appeal to emotion. Right? I would also be appealing to authority. I can tell you who's who and what's what, rather than giving you data, perhaps giving you my conclusion, but giving you data to check that conclusion. Does this conclusion follow that data? So we're using appeals to emotion. And what's cool, if you know kind of the decision theory, neuroscience piece of this, is those appeals to emotion are what allow our personal beliefs to overcome any need for factuality, any need for evidence, because we want to be right. We have really cool biases. You've all heard of confirmation bias. Yeah, right? This is where you see what you expect to see. There's also one called my side bias. Right? So I should dig at the liberals a little bit. Liberals all have this. They believe in climate change, whether they understand it or not, because that's what our team believes in. Right? They believe in certain immigration policies, whether they can explain. Like it's just normal. It's not that they have more of that, but everybody has a our side bias. This is what our team thinks, and therefore it must be true. But it's not based on facts. Okay? We have the availability heuristic. I love to say heuristic because what it does to my face when I just try saying that for me for a moment. Heuristic. So the availability, heuristic. I can't talk at all. I'm so good on my mouth. So the availability heuristic is that we tend to assess a situation by what information is most available. Right? So depending on your news source, you might have a whole different picture of what's real than if you had a different news source. And we'll get into this a little bit later. It's quite interesting. Some of you might even work for Google, which is synonymous with look it up nowadays. So you know Google has this algorithm thing that I don't really understand. And basically they're kind of like two elements if I understand it correctly. One is who pays to have their website at the top, and then the other is what the robot thinks you want to see. So there's no hierarchy of accuracy. There's only hierarchy of your biases and who paid. And when you combine that with availability heuristic, confirmation bias, my side bias, and you're living in a post-truth world, you can see how if someone appeals to your emotion, right? These immigrants are this and this and this. Your mind will go, well, that seems right. That actually, and you don't need to fact check it, right? Because we live in these echo chambers that encourage us to think the same thoughts and not deviate from our thought bunkers. And it's quite troubling. So this is what post-truth refers to. Does it seem more familiar now? Does it seem like, oh, he's not talking about something he just made up? That's actually what I saw yesterday morning. Okay? So this is the post-truth era. Word of the year. Wow. So I was listening to the radio a couple weeks ago, and I only caught this one little snippet. I didn't know who the interviewers were, who the interviewees were. But they were talking about the internet and cybersecurity and all these different issues. And one of the people brought up that we're living in an interesting age partially because we have access to so much information. And our little brains are not meant to sort that much information. Like we're going to need some, cybernetic upgrades or board implants or something if we're going to be able to deal with that much information. And so what this speaker, whoever he was saying is how that tends to work is that exposed to the onslaught of information, it looks overwhelming, and so we go with our gut feeling, right? We go, oh man, this is a lot of information, and then somewhere in our subconscious we go, well, I don't want to deal with all of that. That seems impossible. So what seems right? And we go with our gut. Do I start with that slide? Where is it? There it is. We go with our gut. There are so many facts and then pseudo-facts, right? Alternative facts, if you will, that it's really quite challenging. So we're here in a UU church this morning, fellowship, And because you look up the docs, he said church, but actually I fact checked it as I fact checked it. But we're here in a UU community this morning, and a lot of us are probably, UUs tend to be people who like to look at the facts. But I wonder, have any of us felt like somebody made a claim, and you're like, oh, I should really look that up, and then you start trying to find citations for it, and it's just completely overwhelming to swim. Have you felt this, any of us? Yeah. On a different subject than the socio-political, but like diet, have you ever tried to look up what's the best diet for human beings or yourself? And it's like, and there's research for all of it, actually, like high cholesterol, don't skip on the cholesterol, that's, it's like, oh, okay, cool, eggs, and then by lunch I've read another article, and it's like, oh, I should be vegan, this is not good, and then another article, oh, vegans are myth. Well, they've got a good chain of citations there too. Oh man, what to do? And it gets a little like, by the evening, you're just having like 3 plates of lasagna and a couple of glasses of wine because that feels right. Who wants to swim through all the gunk? So our old, I think, built into us, humans are natural empiricists, right? We try stuff out, we see if it works. This is how we invented the stick and the rock, the early human tools, and then rock on the end of a stick, and all of these, up to computers and spaceships, and all of these cool things that we have now. And I think we default, we're like, well, I don't know what to do. I'll just try something and see what happens. But we're in an age where if you and 48% of the country just try something, our technology, our intercommunication, our massive anthropomorphic change of the planet, anthropogenic change of the planet, has such rapid results that going with our gut is actually quite dangerous to all of us. So this is a post-truth world situation that we find ourselves in. And that's the truth. You can look it up. So today, I'm going to propose to you, though, that things are not as bad as they seem. Hopefully, I've done a good journalist thing here and got you to go, oh yeah, it is really bad. Keep watching for the solution. I'm going to propose to you that things are not quite as bad as they seem. Last week, if you were here, I gave a talk on the life cycle of personal and social change. And in that, we talked about how every relationship with ourselves or with another that is going to grow falls into a state of chaos at some point or another, right? When you decide, oh yeah, let's grow to the next level, let's go deeper, or let's just not stagnate, there's always going to be a period where things start to rattle and shake and get a little bit crazy before, sometimes they do fall apart, but other times, we've known in our own lives that things rattle and shake and get crazy, and then they evolve to another level. I'm going to propose to you today that if we were to use it right, the post-truth era that we live in is actually one of these states of chaos that's leading us to much needed evolution of humans on planet Earth. Let's check it out and see what happens. Okay, so first, we have to find out, how did we get here? So human beings, as you may know, often recapitulate, individual human beings recapitulate the entirety of our species' evolution in an individual life. Right? So when you're born, you're a tiny shamanic animist. And with your magical incantation, you make milk fall from the sky. So, and what the theorists tell us is that you're living in this kind of world, like they're figuring out you're in what do they call it, infantile oceanic experience, right? You're like, you have to figure out what's you and what's not you. Like you do a number of experiences, you bite the blanket, it feels fine. You bite your finger, ow! Oh, maybe this isn't me, maybe this is me, but you're merged with the entirety of the world for a while. And how you think stuff happens, the psychologists believe, is very magical in nature, much like a lot of our ancestors believed. right? You do the right incantation, you do the right symbolic gesture, and you change reality itself because you are in the oceanic connection with reality. And then you grow up a little bit, and like our ancestors, you become a tiny tyrant. You become a little warlord. You become a warlord in your house. And the warlord period, it has no fixed boundary, right? So sometimes, the terrible 2s and 3s and 4s and 5s and 6s and 7s and 8s and 9 and 10, etc. So, but there's a warlord period. Very important, we find in psychological theory, if you don't go through a warlord phase, you may not ever develop a healthy personality, or a good egoic structure, right? So, you gotta let it warlord it up a little bit, and then also tone down the warlord. Hey, honey, what do you mean? Are you being love? You're acting like a warlord. I'm telling myself, you're a warlord right now. Do you need a huggy? Okay, and then apparently we grow from warlording hood, war lady. That just sounds kind of cooler. Anyway, war being. We grow from war being, tyrants, to fundamentalists, right? So in human evolution, what tended to happen is like these warlords started to figure out fundamental principles, and then rapidly their societies began building pyramids and taking slaves and having gods that gave you all the laws, right? Because there's something in us that would like to know what are the laws by which reality functions. And you can see third graders really like get a third grader a book on their interest, or the video game they want to figure out, or the computer program they want to learn to design, and they can rattle off all the names and the laws and the things and the things. They don't know anything about cultural relativism, really. I mean, if that was their thing, they could probably recite the theory, but what research tends to show is that that part of the brain isn't actually developed yet, but knowing what our family stands for, what our community stands for, what type, how many scales are on a stegosaurus, whatever it is, they nail it, they have it, right? And of course, you see this recapitulating ancient human history, pyramid builders, walls of Jericho builders, we have gods and women and cattle are all owned properties that the next tribe over doesn't know, so we have to go to war with them and stuff like that. If we are lucky, we get to, I believe this is similar to Piaget's state of formal operational, right? So instead of like just memorizing the rules, you can actually think about how these rules are made. And in human history, this seems to be about the time of the Western Enlightenment period. There have always been good peak experiencers in every part of history, but as far as a cultural wave, it wasn't until about the Renaissance, the 1600s, and then bam, the Enlightenment world, and wow, you really have to think about how we're thinking about things and look at things based on scientific principles. So if you're lucky, by about the time that you're a teenager, you're starting to get this process. Like you can understand different kinds of mathematics because your mind can understand, this is how that works. You're not just memorizing multiplication tables and things like that. You're, I get why they changed it to Common Core, which is so weird. But for algebra, it's making them memorize things that become principles later on that, unlike me, you don't have to go and unlearn all the things you learned to get there. Right? Fixed rules in elementary school mathematics, amorphous stuff in college mathematics. So this is kind of where we're going. Okay, and then some percentage of our human population has gotten to this point. Some percentage has gotten here. But there's an interesting thing. Like in Piaget's theory, most of us, if we get to our teens, we get to formal operational, and then that's just where you go, right? But in terms of how we relate to the world, kind of emotionally, we can have this like emotional, moral, spiritual center of gravity. Some of us get arrested at a lower level of human evolution, right? So think about it. The biggest climate change denier might still be able to build you a perfectly functional coal plant, right? They can think scientifically, but the type of science they accept will be based on their fundamentalist beliefs. Right? Oh, no, I don't want to hear any evidence about climate change. Well, how are our figures this month? Oh, the figures are blah, 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 blah. Oh, the I don't know what parts are in that coal plant, but the coal burning thing isn't working. Oh, well, I can fix that. You know, so they can think rationally, but the emotional center is somewhere else, right? If your sort of center of gravity for your personal development is in animism, you'll hear climate change is just a big one, so I'll use that. You'll hear climate change and you'll think, well, I'll just call on my tribe's deity and he'll fix it. Right? I'll say the correct magic words, I'll do the correct postures. You know, the news tells me most of that in that religion is not being gay, and then that fixes environmental problems. Right? Somebody just said that again about the fires in California. Right? And it's like, well, this is just pure, like, 500,000 years ago thinking. Right? Even though they might be able to run a computer, right? Download software with the best, right? Because you can use a Google machine, scientific technology, with a totally fundamentalist heart, a totally fundamentalist center of gravity. You can look up evidence to support what you believe, hateful ideas about other people, even though your brain has developed to the point that you could maybe build this technology, but you're also like such a kind of weird tribalist that you also hate scientists. Right? And these two things seem to be able to coexist in the same mind at the same time. Okay, then, so we've gotten ourselves up to the Enlightenment era and our teenage years. Then this cool thing happened called postmodernism. Are any of you, some of you, if you have the same echo chamber on the internet that I have, there's this big debate about whether postmodernism is good or evil. Right? There's this whole, like, apparently our colleges have been, some people say, have been largely overwhelmed by postmodernism, and there's this like upsurge against, and there's this whole bickering battle that I want to try to recreate for you. But one of the things that's cool is that when you get to this wave of human development, postmodernism, like starting in our 1960s really as a real thing, you start to catch that while science is neat, it also depends on who gets funded. Right? While science is neat, the research that we get, like what we know about how life works depends on who gets funded. Right? And I know a lot, we're largely a pro-science community, a lot of you are scientists, and so this may be hard to hear, but it's easier to understand when you think about like the studies on climate change that were funded by Exxon, right? The studies on the effects of smoking that were funded by the tobacco companies. And what kind of results did they get? Well, they got results that shine their view in a very positive light. Right? There's this whole thing called the file drawer problem. I'm not a scientist, but I've heard there's this whole thing, where you can take some of these results, just put them in the file drawer, and then present these in order to make your claims look really neat. Right? And what this postmodern way, it starts to look at that, looking back on pure rationality, or all these enlightenment guys like, I don't think you quite know what you're dealing with here. We look at what we think is important, what we prioritize, the questions we ask are culture bound, right? So we're asking questions about how to live a good life, how to promote health and wellness for people from like a British colonialist mindset here in America, right? What we do, our science questions, the ethical questions we ask are still mired in this thing of going to other people's countries, giving them God's law, and bringing them up to the right way to live. So you get this, and I think personally, that's really, it's kind of a cool form of post-truth, right? Because you can see how you graduated from fundamentalism, you go, no, we gotta check things out, we gotta find the principles. And then science says, we've got the principles now, we know what they are. And then you get the necessary evolution of postmodernism that says, but all these principles are actually largely culture-bound. To a large degree, these are culture-bound principles. Maybe not string theory, but maybe. How much of string theory is made from the type of language we have to use to express these concepts? Like our mathematical system comes about because we have 10 of these. That's where decimals come from. So I'm not a smart enough mathematician or Noam Chomsky or whatever to know how much, but it's not absurd to wonder if we were a type of species that could ask different questions, might we have a whole different view of reality? And that's very neat because we start to see how issues of power inform policy and ethics and science. And we shine a really important light on not just, okay, this says these guys are getting clean water while these guys are pouring lead into the same so-called clean. It starts to shine a light on some real inadequacies in the system. Okay, we're getting to post-truth. So there's a good post-truth here. But a problem also happens, and I'm going to give you my theory for how we got to the post-truth era. You can look up some of the threads for this. It seems as if, okay, you've got a truth era, which is rational, teenage, algebraic, Western Enlightenment principles. And then you've got post-truth in postmodernism. You've also got pre-truth in fundamentalism and tribalism. Does that make sense? We humans, we go through all of these, and you probably got some friends. Do any of you have pre-truth friends still? See a couple of these. The thing to know is that both post-truth and pre-truth are they're not exactly the same kind of rationality, and they get easily confused. So you've got the pre-truth camp jumping on the post-truth ideas to say, look, there are no fixed truths. So whatever I tell you, whatever I believe, whatever seems right to me in the moment is probably what's right. It's this amazing thing. Like, you're taking this third grade mentality and taking post-collegiate language and using that to argue for your third grade mentality. It's really kind of cool. So you have these like neo-Nazis who hate postmodernism using the language of cultural relativism to explain why being a Nazi is okay. Because that's just my culture. Right? This white culture, okay, white nationalist culture, okay, white supremacist culture, it's okay because it's another expression of culture. And all expressions of culture are equal. Don't disempower me. We're a marginalized community. So it's really neat. They're taking the language of postmodernism. We learned there is such a thing as a marginalized community. People didn't really know that in 1950. I mean, if you were in a marginalized community, you did. But as far as the cultural trends, what's disseminated, nobody knew those words, marginalized community. So now, that's big. And you see this pushback, like, well, we're a marginalized community, the 1%. Everybody wants to tax us. And what about us? We're going to march. We're going to occupy the gas station. We're going to occupy steel mills. We're going to start trade wars. And then, gosh darn it, we poor, marginalized, white, cisgendered, hetero men of wealth will take back what's ours. Because we've been hurt and marginalized. And it's a really weird kind of thing. Like, we can't blame some people, some authors right now, who I don't want to name to give them any more publicity, but would say that postmodernism is at fault for the chaos in the world, right? And they're doing what everybody does who's in a camp. They say, well, it must be those guys in that other camp, right? So some people in the modernist camp, well, postmodernism isn't us, so that must be the problem. Right? Postmodernism and pre-modernism are both non-modernism, but one is an evolution beyond, and one is a not yet evolved. It creates a really interesting piece of chaos for us to swim in. And, like you know, I think chaos is not necessarily a bad thing. So here we are. We have grown through tribalism and fundamentalism and modernism, but it's a modernism that disempowers people and spreads the great white way to poor little brown countries who don't know what's. I mean, that's really true. And postmodernism, they came along and said, like, dude, you can't do that. That's not cool. What about the prime directive? Sorry, I've been watching too much Star Trek. But anyway, like, you can't just go push your culture on that. And then in this mix, we've got all of these cultural battles going on, because some of us are still fundamentalists, right? Some of us are still, well, no, business and colonialization is good. That's how we bring the world forward. Others are soft-hearted non-marginalizers. And it's nearly impossible for all of those people to live together in harmony. Have you noticed? No, I don't know what you're talking about. And here's the reason, I think, to make it simple. It's because we can't agree on what's the correct procedure to assess a validity claim. We can't agree on what's the correct procedure to assess a validity claim. So, in pure rationalism, rationality, right? You assess a validity claim by testing it. And if you can replicate that test, then, oh, hey, there's a validity claim. Postmodernism makes that a little bit weirder, because then you have to wonder who's replicating, who funded the study, how is the abstract of this study worded? Is it worded in a way that makes it seem like something's happening that isn't there, right? And the New Age hippies do it about acupuncture, and then the quack washed-out commerce do it the other way about acupuncture, and you never really get a clear picture of like, well, what percent does this relieve my headaches? Because everybody's spinning it in some way. And so you get this like, oh, and some of us, we're so fragile in our rationality that we decide just to slip back into a fundamentalist camp because it's easier. It's easier to know what's true and not have to ponder it out and go get a philosophy of science degree to learn how to read the internet. Okay, well, so this is cool. There's a mission. What do we do about it? Well, I did have this plan I've been holding on to a long time. It involves making everyone who wants to run for a political office first take 101, what's a valid citation. This class I had to take in an online college course. Right? It's a 1-credit class. It only takes about an hour and a half a week, and then you can learn what sources you're allowed to cite and there is such a thing as fake news. But not all news is fake news. Oh, and then when you realize that, you have to take 102, which is basic logic and rhetorical analysis, critical thinking, 102. And then your performance, according to those standards, you have to take this, what's a valid citation before you do the rest of your college work, right? Or else you just get Fs, right? Or incomplete maybe. So wouldn't it be neat? I thought this for years, like before the internet. If you made politicians give accurate citations, make accurate statements, and if they didn't, they got an F for fired. I just thought that would be really cool. It's also a bit of a pipe dream, right? Like, I think a lot of us have been dreaming of this for a long time. Like it's kind of the American dream. Like, what would it be like to have a country without propaganda? That the light of reason led us toward these beautiful things for all of us. And it hasn't happened yet in the last 200 and some odd years. Some of us are less hopeful that it's going to happen in the next 20 or 5. But, so that's my pipe dream. What I think and then what's cool, I believe, if you look at cultural evolution, it's always a revolution that leads to evolution, right? So if you look at
there were rumblings since the Renaissance of this, like Galileo was scientifically thinking, and Copernicus was in there somewhere, these guys, but it wasn't really until the late 1700s when everything just like blew up and people went to war for rationality. People literally, for rational principles, for evidence-based practices, they literally overturned the establishments that were in place in those days. I have a great quote from Cicero, or if you like the New Latin, Cicero, who says, For there is but one essential justice which cements society, and one law which establishes this justice. This law is right reason, which is the true rule of all commandments and prohibitions. Whoever neglects this law, whether written or unwritten, is necessarily unjust. So this guy's writing this 2,000 some odd years ago, but it's the principle that, like Jefferson wrote down famously about our legal system. Like, you have to find evidence to be able to convict someone of a crime. So you have an explosion there, you have an industrial revolution, and there was plenty of chaos that happened there. You have a civil rights revolution in our 60s, and then you're starting to see today, I posit, and sociologists, you can debate me later, but I don't think we've seen the level of rattling that we see right now since 1960 to 1970. I don't think we've seen this much discomfort in our culture since civil rights marches and Vietnam protests and the pushback from the establishment forces that we're trying to overturn, right? What did those marches accomplish? Well, they accomplished that marginalization is a household word, right? That's not done, but that work has actually cemented into the subconscious of our society. So the question I would ask, for me to navigate, because it's hard to navigate this stuff, man. If you're kind of a rationalist who believes in justice, peace, and evidence-based practices, looking at our culture, it's a little bit worrisome. Like where the heck are we going? And what gives me a little bit of hope is we have to wonder, not just like, oh man, how bad could this go? Because that doesn't go anywhere. We might also get to wonder, what's the next innovation that's going to carry us forward? If we look back, it's not bound to happen. It's not like God has decreed, every so often I will make a revolution and thou shalt evolve. No, we have to do it ourselves. But if we look back, most of the time when things got this tense, people said, no, you just can't have witch trials anymore. We evolved to something much, much cooler. So we might want to wonder, like, I'm thinking it's the next internet. I'm thinking it's actually, like right now, we're trying to have PolitiFact, and we're trying to have this, and Facebook's got a big brothery kind of thing, like this article may not be true, and it all feels a little bit weird. But what might be the next iteration that actually ties it all together for us? Very cool things are possible. Until that innovation happens, we don't know what's possible. We're just sitting here from the chaos, wondering how this is all going to go. So if you're that innovator, I call to you. If you're that friend, if we just plan, like, what we need, no, we don't need to fight this guy and punch that guy, and you may need to hold your ground, but we need to innovate. I personally believe we're ripe for the next evolution. And the best job that we can do is figure out what that's going to be. It's not going to be modernism again. It's not going to be postmodernism again. It's going to be something that likely has to integrate these previous ways into a higher order if we're going to do something better than we've done before. So the good news in the chaos is that everybody knows what we've done before isn't working. Everybody knows fast change needs to take place. All we have to do now is figure out what that kind of massive, beautiful change is going to be. I got one more. In the meantime, while we're waiting for whichever one of you is the futurist, economist, computer programming sociologist who's going to fix it all for us, the rest of us also have a job to do. which is to be the rhetorical fallacy ninja. The rhetorical fallacy ninja. And let's be honest, this is one of those things where it'll sound like, oh, but how effective is that really? And I don't know, you're asking me to, can individuals really solve the problems of the world? This is a valid question, right? For a lot of these things, we need massive people power. We need to make institutional change. I'm not debating that at all. But at the same time, the models of people power that created vast institutional change from the 60s up to now are fizzling. Those models have become obsolete as their opponents have adapted to them, like the Borg. Seriously, just watch Star Trek. It's everything's in there. We have to, at the grassroots level, the serious grassroots level, is how we talk with people. Not who we talk to, but how we have every conversation. And there's this saying about like you're planting seeds that you may not get to eat the fruit of, right? These are seeds for your grandchildren. These are seeds for your children. These are seeds for your great-grandchildren. We've lived in a world where in our discussions with each other, we're talking about things that can't be proven or disproven. And we have a good old argument about it. And the cultural sort of trance is that nobody uses the vast technological innovation that we have, that you could look that up. Right? Oh, what about this? I think we should do this about immigrants. You could look up if anyone's done that before and see how it worked. Amazing. I think this about socialized healthcare. Well, let's look up every other country with socialized healthcare and see how that works. Right? And you can find evidence for these practices. So I'm imagining, because when I have these conversations, it's like ninja stars of appeals to emotion and appeals to authority and all of these fallacious arguments. They come rushing at you. And if you're not ready for that, you'll go, well, you're just a jerk and a troglodyte. And there's this thing called research. Have you ever heard of it? But you need to be like, with a honed blade, waiting for the next ching, ching, appeal to authority, ching, sorry, false citation, I don't believe anything from false news, ching, right? And I think we need to be able to model in a postmodern world, right? Looking at correct validity claims, what evidence looks like, what reason looks like. And the wave may not take off immediately. It may not take off in time for us to receive the benefits. But if we don't nail that down, here's a kid planting seeds. Okay. If we don't nail that down now, when's it going to happen? If little individuals don't just start modeling in their conversations with Uncle Ted, wow, Uncle Ted, where did you get that information? Sweetly and kindly. And making Uncle Ted go, I don't know. I just heard it somewhere. Those are the moments which can transform our society. You don't have to debate religious people. And by that I mean people who believe things without evidence. Whether it's about the person who lives in the sky or under the earth, or whether it's about rocks falling into the ocean causing sea level rise. Those are religious people. In Buddhist debate, they have a slogan that they use, which I don't suggest doing it out loud. But it's, I can't debate a crazy person. In Buddhist debate, they'll say it out loud. When your opponent's offering you an argument without a real chain of reasoning behind it, you just say, I can't debate a crazy person. Walk out. That's really cool. So you're still allowed to do that and be a ninja, right? This fight is below my level. And you take a ninja sword and you leave. But with the Uncle Teds of the world, who can be asked the question, what are you basing this on? Where's your source for that? How authoritative is that source? what are the biases of the people we're listening to, we can slowly, creepingly force us to evolve out of the post-truth era into something cooler that we haven't even imagined yet. All of us weird humans, tribalists, fundamentalists, rationalists, postmodernists, and integralists and trans-integral holisticists, and all of us have to live together. We're going to have to figure out if there's some solid ground that we can all stand on together or not. And the sooner we start doing that hard work within ourselves and in our communities, the sooner we can see a more peaceful and loving world to inhabit. So with that, let's sing a final